Counter-Strike is a game that has largely remained the same for the past 20 years, with changes to the meta being incredibly gradual over time as players experiment and innovate iterative changes, with a few exceptions of course. Like in between games when new nades have been added, or when core concepts are slightly altered, or when new guns are added.
One-shotting people, literally with the right click, one-shotting somebody. You can one-shot somebody with a fucking pistol! Why is that allowed?
However, back in 2018 and 2019, a gun that had previously seen almost zero play by pros and casual players alike began to see a dramatic rise in popularity: the SG553. The SG553 was a gun that arguably had the most atmospheric rise in the history of Counter-Strike, and then the most catastrophic fall after it was nerfed. So why did it experience such a rise, and how did it affect the game during its reign? As a T, on a full buy round, all people ever bought was an AK, unless you're an AWPer. Adding armor and utility, a full buy cost only $4,700, and when not using utility, a buy cost only $3,700. Even though there was a rifle better in almost every conceivable way for the terrorist side, the SG553, people never even gave it a chance, because it was just slightly less economic than the AK, costing $3,000, meaning a full buy would set you back $5,000. Everyone was simply too obsessed with the iconic AK that had been the creme de la creme since the inception of Counter-Strike. All the SG needed was a small catalyst for players to see the light. A price reduction from $3,000 to $2,750 was all it took to start a revolution. But before we get into the SG's rise, let's first look at the stats and compare the 2018 SG to the 2018 AK to see what everyone was missing out on. Firstly, rate of fire. The SG had a rate of fire of 666 RPM versus the AK's 600 RPM. Damage. The SG did 29 to the chest and 37 to the stomach, while the AK did 35 to the chest and 44 to the stomach, both with one-shot headshots. Unarmored damage is the AK's only clear win over the SG. But with armor penetration, which the SG had 100% of while the AK only had 77.5%, against armored opponents, both the SG and AK kill to the chest in 4 shots, but when aiming for the stomach, the SG kills in 3, while the AK kills in 4. Accuracy. The SG's accurate range was 39 meters, and the AK's accurate range was 24 meters. And most importantly, DPS. DPS at 100 units for the SG was 331, and the AK was 277, meaning in fights where you're fighting an armored opponent and hit 4 body shots, the SG will kill faster. The SG had better accuracy, a faster time to kill, and with 3-shot kill capacity when aiming for the stomach, it was the better pick at both close and long range. An extra benefit was the SG had an incredibly simple spray pattern, meaning everyone could use it to its full capacity far faster. It's clear the SG was a better gun than the AK, so on the 9th of October 2018, when the price was reduced to $2,750, everything was primed for it to become the rifle of choice on T side. The community began to wake up to the SG's power, with content creators talking about it, Reddit and Twitter going crazy, and most importantly, as a way to drastically alter the meta, pros began using it, and in numbers too. According to HLTV data, the SG at the beginning of 2019 was essentially at 0% usage, but by mid-2019 it was sitting pretty at 20% of all kills. At the beginning of 2019, AK usage was sitting at around 35%, but by mid-2019 it was sitting at 20%. This really visualizes the way T-side rifle choice swapped from the AK to the SG. See here how it progresses over the year, over all events, consistently growing in usage throughout the year, reaching its peak towards the end of the year at IEM Beijing 2019. Its use was not even affected by Valve's attempt to revert the SG back to its old price of $3,000. The genie was out of the bottle now, and it would take a bit more than that to stuff it back in. Especially at a time when the old guard of CSGO was beginning to retire and new faces were popping up on the Tier 1 circuit, it was a good time to see who was flexible to changes in the meta and who wasn't. Key users or abusers of the SG that come to mind from that era are Brolan and Elige. The gun was so good, some began picking up the SG to hold angles as a replacement for the AWP or Scout.
The SG553 can serve as a viable counter and alternative to the AWP and the Scout.
And really the only reason not to pick the SG up was purely because the risk of CTs picking it up and holding angles against you. After such a meteoric rise to the top, and changing a weapon meter that had largely been the same for 20 years, it begun to attract some unwanted attention. And after 549 days, the SG finally received a death blow. After 549 days of being known to be the best T-sided rifle, Valve took the SG out back and sent it off to the farm. They dropped its accuracy and rate of fire to a point it became almost useless. It dropped from 666 RPM to 545, making its damage per second lower than the AK's. Its accuracy was also dropped across the board, with unscoped standing and crouching, and scoped standing and crouching receiving nerfs. It really was a bloodbath, and even after community complaints, many thought the nerf was overboard. What goes up must come down, and down the SG went. Usage dropped back down to near 0% almost immediately, and the gun was in a far worse state than before any of the price changes were made. It was now not a good pick in any scenario. The SG was now an exclusive group of weapons made up of the M249, MP5, Sawn-Off, and Bison that have no scenario where it's beneficial to pick them. Even the R8 has some usage with its running accuracy. The rise and fall of the SG was certainly one of the most exciting eras of CS, both in a professional capacity and as a casual player. It truly changed the way the game was played for a significant enough time frame that it was able to cement itself in the immense and storied history of Counter-Strike. But today, with the increased pace of the game, with wide Ferrari peaks and junk slides becoming the norm, the SG is unlikely to see any use anytime soon. The AK simply outclasses it now, and the status quo has certainly been restored, for better or worse.